Dr. John DeMartini. This is one of the most amazing and inspiring shows that you can listen into. If you want to be on the edge of your seats, if you want to open up your heart, if you want to expand your mind, and you want to meet incredible people, stay tuned because you're just about to experience a transformative radio show that will change your life. And you're listening to the Dr. Pat Show that's coming up right next.
Welcome to the Dr. Pat Show. Talk radio to thrive by. Powerful, inspiring, and coming to you live, bringing you stories of people like you and me, busting through and living life full out. Get ready to dare to wonder what your life would be like if you knew you could not fail.
Welcome all of you to the Dr. Pat Show. Put that back up, Megan. Let's see that. Let's just okay, perfect for this show.
You remember this? Do you remember this?
Yeah.
When we first met all those years ago, and I said, I just picked this card up, and you guys gave me the invitation to come on board with TPR. And I thought, well, wow, why wouldn't I do this? And then you told me that this was your quote.
Yes, it is. And it goes back like, oh my God. I want to say puberty, but no.
Maybe you had that insight back then.
It goes back to let me introduce the show. First of all, I know we're already up and running. For those of you out there, this is really quite an honor. And this is the time. Now, many of you are looking at the end of this year and you're just, I don't know, what are you doing? You're scratching your head. You think you need some kind of supplements, maybe increasing your therapy. Hello, ladies, 500,000 of you got fired this year. So what are you thinking? Well, here's what Megan, Edge, and I are thinking. What we were thinking is, let's reconnect. It was that simple. Then it was, let's catch up. Then it was, let's tell the story of the journey. And Megan, you held up that card, and the answer to that question as, look, you're a master healer. I've known you. I know your work. I have seen client reviews in the 23 years I'm doing this, but your clients love you. And yet you and I have both been through some very interesting times, especially in the past couple of years. Yeah. But one of the things that you're masterful at is it's kind of like you shed your skin and boom, you got a shiny new skin. And you may not know what color that skin's going to be right now.
Yes, that's true. There is a leap of faith involved in that process, for sure.
So today we're talking about navigating challenging times with intuition, creativity, and faith. Because if y'all are doing it any other way, you're going to want to listen to this show because there is no other way to do it. And we're going to walk through that through Megan's journey, her life, her eyes, and mine. You know, sometimes, Megan, let's start this out. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Well, when people get challenges, that's not on the list. Like those.
Failing is not on the list?
When they think about what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail, they're not thinking, I think, wow, maybe I think I'll lose my home. Or no, they're not thinking that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as you and I both know, some of the greatest achievements by people in the world came after some of the greatest horrific challenges over and over and over again. Except, of course, if you were Napoleon. That didn't work out very well for you.
Funny, I was just reading a book about Napoleon. Interesting, you should bring him into the conversation.
It's intuition.
It is intuition, isn't it?
But let's take a look at this and let's take a look at what resilience is. Here is the thing for me. I'm making a major change, and I'm not going to talk about it a whole lot till maybe later in the show. But that is what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And I think one of the hardest things that we do, and I really want you to weigh in on this, is future tripping. See, 35 years in recovery, no matter what goes on in my life, drinking and using is not part of the option. That isn't an option. So when you face things in your life, you must have intuition, creativity, and faith. But for you, these years and catching up with you, they've been a bit rocky.
Well, yes.
You
And
know, I didn't say bad.
I know you didn't, and I
It's like
appreciate
rocky,
that.
like a rock in a boat, like rocking like that, rocking.
Right. Because as we were coming into this show and I was thinking about what does resilience mean to me and what is the difference between somebody who shows up with resilience and somebody who maybe doesn't appear to have it is about the way we're thinking about the things that are happening to us in our lives, right? Is it bad? Is it good? Maybe it isn't either. There's something else going on. And it's that opportunity to step back from your circumstances and ask these questions, such as, why? What is the reason? What is there that I could perhaps grow from or learn
Yeah,
from? What if I
yeah.
didn't react and I responded? And what if I had a belief that no matter what, this too shall pass and I will be better or things will be better instead of letting yourself fall into the ups and the downs? And then the other piece of course, and you say the last few years have been rocky. For me, it's been rocky with loss,
Yeah,
tremendous, deep loss, deeper than I ever thought I
yeah.
would experience. And as I was riding that wave of loss, literally, I liken it to being on a river. You know, I could either let myself get caught in the eddies at the edge of the river and just stay there and swirl around and get dizzy and not know what was happening, or I could push myself into the center of the river and I could let the river take me
Mm,
to where I need to go. And I could allow myself to feel all the feelings, feel all the feels, feel the pain and feel the regret and feel the sense of betrayal and all the other things that were showing up for me and recognize that these are okay to feel. It's not comfortable. It doesn't feel good. But if I allow myself to feel them, then I can allow myself to flow.
mm,
And I
yeah.
think that's really key to everything that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, it's so key because I love the way you describe that. And, there's so many things we learn in life. And, Linda and I have been going back and forth about this because we're getting ready to make a big life transition in a good way, for a lot of reasons. And yet it doesn't mean you can't be sad
Mm-hmm.
or a little bit afraid is okay,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
had a therapist say something to me, and I want you to comment on this.
Okay.
You got to give our therapist a little bit of a nod. And this one goes way back when I lost my job at AT&T at 24 and a half years, like 6 months short of a pension. Okay, they
Mm-hmm.
knew what they were doing right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I started young, like as a baby. So that's how come that happened. Um, but Juanita Lovett, Dr. Juanita Lovett was my lifesaver, saved me out of an abusive relationship, a physically abusive relationship. And then this came. And she said, Pat, show me in your life where you have any sort of track record of not rebounding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm still thinking about that one.
But you have rebounded, have you not? Many
Yes, but
times.
she wanted me to think about a time I
Oh, a time you hadn't. I
hadn't.
see. I see.
And and so when you think about the rebounds,
Mm-hmm.
because that's really what you've done. Call it a rebound, call it a rebirth, call it a
Mm-hmm.
reincarnation, call it whatever you want. We could be a reanimator and
Mm-hmm.
be AI. But that's why
That's a whole other show.
that's a whole other show. But we're talking about this because there is a story for you to tell, because so many people need to hear it.
Mm. Well, shall I dive in then?
Jump at it. And I see you went with the whole rocking thing by the whole river thing, right? You
Yes.
went with that, didn't
I did.
you?
Well,
Good one.
analogies are really helpful. Analogies can help us take ourselves out of our own monkey mind and this sort of vision that we might have of our situation, which is that we're so entrenched in it that we can't see outside of it. We're so enmeshed in the pain, or we're so enmeshed in the regret or the loss that we can't even imagine what it felt like to not have that and what it might feel like to move through that and into something else. And without giving a laundry list of the things that happened in a short period of time, the number of losses and how and why, people can go back and look at some of our Playing on the Edge radio shows that we did, because a lot of what I was going through over those years, we brought into those shows. You know, we talked about death and dying, we talked about loss and regret. We did a lot of shows around these life circumstances. But when we stopped doing that show was with this final loss that was so immense and so unexpected that I knew my best way to navigate and to move through that loss was to take myself away, to take myself to not be available any longer to the people who I had been available to for so long, and to make myself wholly available to the ones who needed me the most in that moment, which were my children and my husband and my dreams and the future I thought I had been building towards. The loss that we experienced was the loss of a family property. And on the outside, that might not seem like as big a deal as, say, losing my father or losing my dear friend. But actually, it was such a deep loss because that family property was such a part of who I identified as myself. I was part of that land. I was part of that history. We'd been there for 75, 80 years in that space. It was part of my future planning. But that was where I was going to be, and I was going to bring my children there and my grandchildren there. And I had this whole grand plan, and I had been allowed to foster and build that plan. And then suddenly it was gone, and the family member who owned the property said, "I'm selling." And we had to wrap our heads around so many different aspects of that experience. And the pain that I went through and still carry, because it's not the kind of loss you get over. And I say to all my clients who come to me with grief and loss, you're not going to get over this. You're going to learn how to live with it. And I recognized as everything was unfolding and as I was desperately trying to find any possible way to buy the property and keep it, you know, for our family and for the future that we had envisioned, I recognized a couple of things, and they were very humbling. And one of the things I recognized in that moment, with so many people in, you know, kindness in their hearts saying, this will make sense and there's a higher purpose and all those other things that we like to say to ourselves when we're faced with adversity, I came to this stark conclusion, which for me was quite stark, which was that good things can happen to bad people and bad things can happen to good people. And I'm not in a place right now where I'm willing to consider that there's a silver lining to this situation.
Yeah.
I just couldn't go there yet because there was so much involved in this loss.
Yeah.
And I knew we had to ride it. And what I learned through this process was that A, it's okay to grieve deeply, and that loss comes in many, many forms. And I knew that, but it's one thing to know it, it's another thing to be in it. And I also recognized it will pass. I will feel better. It might make sense one day, but right now, I need to be present for every cell in my body that's experiencing this and that's going through this. And I have to stop hiding behind my helping other people as a distraction for the things that I need to experience. And instead, I have to walk my talk.
Mm.
And in doing that, I took myself away from being visible. I became invisible. I took myself off all my social medias. I didn't engage with clients. I said to clients, I'm not available. I stopped my practice. I took myself off of Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and everything. I just stopped interacting on that level for about 2 years. While I figured out how to go from the side of the river and the eddies and just spinning around and feeling like I'm completely out of control, and I have no control over the outcome, but really trying to have some kind of control, any kind of control over what was happening, to saying, okay, day by day, some days hour by hour, and I'll let myself be how I'm being and feel how I'm feeling. And it wasn't easy. I mean, maybe like on the other side of it now, 3 years later, it might sound like this was an easy process, but it really, really was not an easy process at all. But because I had so many tools at my disposal from all the things that I've learned over the years as a healer and the things that I've shared with my students and with my clients, I knew I could do it. But boy, was there ever a part of me, Pat, that really didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it was a really amazing and deeply, profoundly transforming experience.
Yeah. It is the kind of thing that you described. And for people, I want people to get a sense of a few things. One is those of you that don't understand the feeling of homelessness, I want to give you a view
Mm,
because homelessness comes in a lot of different ways and a lot of different forms. And a lot of you may think of the person on the street that you're forced to give a quarter to or whatever. But there are 50 shades of
mm,
homelessness. And for women, the information and statistics show the impact of any form of those is extraordinarily meaningful. How do we know that? Because we don't say bag man, we say bag lady.
mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying? Now, we could spend a whole show on the psychology of that, but that's not the point. When you lose something that has been your home, the way you're talking about it and will continue to describe, that is one of the deepest griefs of homelessness.
Yeah.
It doesn't come back. The home is not coming back,
No.
right?
And that was one of the things we talked about when we were
Yeah,
reconnecting. And I said,
yeah,
it's a different kind of loss than
yeah.
losing a loved one, because when you lose a loved one, that loved one is gone. They're gone.
You're gone.
My father's gone. My friend is gone. My other friend is, my client's gone. They're gone. They've gone somewhere else. I don't know
Yep,
where. We can talk about maybe where they've gone. This home, this property, everything
yep,
that we put into it, my whole life of being there, it's still there. And I'm grateful that it's still there because it is a very unique and very beautiful place, but I'm not still there.
yeah,
And 3 years later, that is still a huge emotional, um, realization,
yeah,
and one that it's difficult. And I use that word very, very seldom because it is such a finite word, but it is a difficult thing to grasp, to come to terms with, that that is no longer an expression of myself, which
yeah.
is what it was. It was an expression of myself and every cell in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And so this process of coming to terms with that is it's a process. It is a journey. It's a level of healing that I'm doing every day. Every day there's another piece of self-care that I include so that I can keep myself resilient and
Yeah,
together and continue to serve in the way that I serve,
yeah.
helping other people, which I'm doing now again, and I have for the last couple of
Of
years.
course you are. But I'm going to throw a term out because this is an important term for our audience because I want them to get this. And I know you ladies, you're going to relate to what I'm saying because I know I work with a couple of you. So what I'm about to say, you're going to get. This is the equivalent to a divorce. And the
Mm,
reason I use that term is those of us that have been kicked out of a residency, myself including, but then kicked out of a family. You can come up with a new word. You can come up with something other than divorce. But those of you that have been through divorce, when the house and the home is on the table, second to the children, it's a dogfight. Why? Because it is Maslow's first rung of the hierarchy of needs. And see, I want y'all to relate to this because I want you all to go back to when Megan and I knew each other in 2009 and 10, and we went through the worst economic. I don't even know what the crazy term for that is, but y'all at the banks, you know what you did. So many people and lost it, and then lost families that wouldn't take them in. What you're talking about is one of the deepest forms of loss because it has more than one layer. It'd be very different, like if you lived in an apartment and your landlord booted you out. Hello, this is not it. This is a multidimensional, familiar, home, relationship, foundational building that affects every family member, your amazing partner in crime, your children, your history, the holidays. And look at you now.
Well, I mean, now, yes, there is that sort of that, not sort of, there is the return, right? Maybe it's a rebirth, maybe it's a renewal, maybe it's the phoenix coming out of the flames. I would say that for me, it wasn't my darkest hour. It wasn't my dark night of the soul, but it was certainly close. But the reason I say it wasn't the darkest night of the soul is because I didn't let it be that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there
I
we go.
didn't let it take me down. I allowed myself to go down, but I did that consciously and I did that with intention because I understood how important that piece of grieving is. And unfortunately, in our culture in North America, we don't give a lot of attention and acknowledgement to grief. I remember when my mother died 25, 30 years ago now, and I was working at the bank. And I got the call that she had died when she was in New Zealand. And I went to my manager and I said, I have to go now. And she said, okay, but you'll be back in 2 days, right? I said, what do you mean 2 days? She said, well, the bank gives you 2 grieving days. I'm sorry, what? 2 grieving days? I have to go to New Zealand.
I know.
I'll be gone for about 10 days. And she said, okay, but they'll be unpaid. That's how much
That's when you use a hand gesture. Uh, but this is the system,
Yeah.
we're in. Part of this too is I love that you allowed it because we know what happens, and you know more than anybody what happens when we don't allow it. A couple of months ago, and I'm not going to mention names, but I am going to tell this because it's haunting to me and daunting. I have had my family disown me, but I was 17, so I didn't really give a what about that. I mean, 17, it was like, great, I'm gonna go party. Okay, and then I ended up homeless, so then it wasn't so great. But when I was 17, okay, you don't like me anymore. Okay, I don't like you either. I did repair that with my stepmom later on in life, but I have a friend, and I'm watching the dynamics just like you described. You haven't talked about it on air, and I'm not going to disclose what your experience was, but I'll give you an analogy that you'll relate to. Did everything for their family, everything. Rescued siblings, literally saved the brother's life from a bad diagnosis in a hospital, dropped everything to take people to the right. Husbands that died, was there for that, opened up their house. And 2 months ago, the sibling says, you're not my sister anymore. What the?
Yeah.
And you still have to be around them. Now, why am I going into this detail? Because I want people to understand what this experience was like for you. Because you, myself, and my friend have one thing in common. We're little resilience machines. When that boat that you got floating down the river, rocking back and forth, develops a little leak, we are bailing that water out until we can't even breathe anymore. The thought of ever giving up never enters our mind.
Yeah.
Then we're protecting everybody else in the boat.
Right.
And then let's talk about intuition, creativity.
Yes.
Then we get an idea to stick a piece of chewing gum in the hole. But you see where I'm going because
Yes,
you had to use every tool in your toolkit to even be on the show today, Megan.
I did. I did. And yes, there is that dynamic. I mean, we were talking about the different layers. And I will share that the family member who owned the house it's a long story, but who owned the house at the time and had for about 30 years or so, had assured us and assured me that we could put all this time and energy and effort into keeping it going and keeping it well, because that vision that we had of being there as a retirement or as the next step in our lives, we should go for that. We should do that. And when it came down to it, and suddenly the house was to be sold, the property was to be sold, there was no room for the family member to discuss that with me, to work with me, to I
Mm.
said, can we not buy it? And they said, no, 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 no. You can put in a bid when it goes on, when it goes up for sale.
Don't
Everything
you love
happened,
that?
everything happened so quickly,
Yeah.
and we weren't prepared. We weren't prepared because everything had been going there for that
Mm.
vision that we had had. And the experience that I had with this family member went from my beloved family member to a person who has not spoken to me in 3 years and will never speak to me again. And I know she won't because I've seen her do this to another family member.
Mm.
So that realization of the connection that had been there, that had been there my whole life, there's that other layer of loss, and just the impact of that and all the different uh I don't know, all the different elements, I guess, of what that means is profound. And that's why I say this was such a deeply, profoundly transformative experience. But again, I could take that. I could say, right, well, I'll never trust anybody again. I could say people aren't trustworthy because this, and this happened to me. But that's not the way that I see the world. And there's a very pragmatic part of myself that says, no, I always knew this was a possibility. I just never thought it would ever happen because of the relationship and the assurances that had been made. But it doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, I did not own that property. And
No.
the person who did could do whatever they like with it, which is what they did. That's my experience of it. Now, the family member's experience of it might be quite different, right? And I may be the bad guy in that person's experience of it. And
Yeah.
the thing is, I don't see this family member as the bad guy. I just recognize that that's no longer a connection that I have with that part of my family
Yeah.
any longer.
Yeah.
And so that's another layer of what that represents, the loss of that and what that represents. But again, the whole point of this conversation is, how do we then navigate an experience like that, or any other experience
Yeah.
that we weren't expecting to have, that creates that sense of
Yeah.
loss, or that experience
Yeah.
of loss. And even when I was saying good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people, and I didn't want to hear anybody tell me about a silver lining yet, I the little voice, like the wise voice in the back of my head, is going, we don't know now.
Yeah.
We can't see it right now because we have to be present for this experience. That's what I really believed at the
Exactly.
time. If I were to have
Exactly.
if I were to have gone into the mindset of silver lining, I would not have been able to go so deep into the grief. And the
Hmm.
grief was layered because it was layered with my father's death, my mother's death, other people who had passed away over that short period of time, and the loss of friendships over the last 5 years as the world imploded, that were pivotal at the time, and then having to recognize that loss. And so that final loss, that's when I said, right, I have to be present for this. I have to walk my talk. And I don't like it. It's not what I want, but I'm going to do it. And in that same moment, Pat, I remember saying to the universe or whomever I talked to, I said, right, but what else can I do now? Like, what else is,
Exactly.
I'm not just going to sit and feel sorry for myself, because I can't do that. I can have a little pity party. I had a few of those, to be sure, and I let myself have them. And then I said, right, pull up your big girl panties, pull up your bootstraps. You can still feel the pain and the loss and the depth of that, but also, what else are you going to do? And that's the creativity piece.
Yeah. Let's
You
hold
have,
that thought because I want to take a break because that is the pivot.
mm,
Everybody's using the word pivot. This is the pivot with the capital P. This is pivot to the third, like a cubed pivot or something, because this is what is required now to understand when you go through the things we go through. There's the word yet.
Yes.
We're going to take a short break. Before we go to break, Megan, just give people a little bit of information and we'll talk about what you are now doing, what the pivot was you made. But intuition and creativity without faith is like faith without works is dead. But what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Lots of different ways. You can certainly head over to my website, which is meganedge.ca, and see all the work that I do and the different links to my YouTube channel where I've got loads and loads of resources and information there. You can also find me on LinkedIn under Megan Edge. You can find me under, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, anywhere else. Oh, and Learn It Live. You can find me on Learn It Live. That's where my online classroom is now. So
Beautiful.
Lots of ways to connect.
When we come back, we're going to take you through the pivot, and the pivot is called resilience with a capital R. And the reason that we talk about that, because it's not defined in a unilateral way. Because in order for you to experience resilience after you just heard what Megan shared and what I shared about my friend, it takes a number of layers. And even if this is the first shot you get at trying on resilience, what we're about to share with you will work. Let's take a short break. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. It's so great to have you tuning into the Dr. Pat Show. That's who I am. Thank you so much for years of having fun with us. Today, a very special friend and colleague, Megan Edge. Of course, you know her show, you know of her work, but this is about telling a story of journeys. This year has been it's been a year of stories, but it's been a year of journeys. It's been numerology people that I thought were just blowing, you know what, said it's a 9-year path, things going to change, things going to end. And I thought, no way. And they're right. But part of that is, what is the emotional? What are you attached to? What are you not letting go of? What are you afraid of? What do you think is going to happen if you do something, if you did something that you knew you could not fail? What if that was it? Megan, thank you for today. I want to continue the story, but one more time, if you could tell, because it's important that we give out your information, because this is the next part of the show, isn't it?
Of what it is I do now?
What are you doing? Okay. Are you like me, just playing ping pong or?
No. It's bubble baths and Chardonnay all day long. Oh my
God, I love
obviously.
That. Somebody got to help me get in and out of the tub. That's the only problem with that.
Well, one of the best descriptions I've ever heard for a Gemini, which is my astrological sign, is a busy mind in many places. So not being one to easily sit in a bubble bath all day and drink Chardonnay, although I do love my baths at the end of the day with my homemade wine, I knew that space needed to open up for other things to show up. That even if I was saying, or not, even if, when I said to my clients and my students, I'm not available and I don't know when I will be available because I need to do this for myself and for my family, I also knew I wasn't going to just be sitting twiddling my thumbs. That's the creativity piece. And being creative and always looking for, what can I do next? What can I offer next? The time that I spent on this property, I was immersed in nature. I've been immersed in nature my whole life. I grew up with that connection to nature, to the forest and to the beaches and to all of that. And my desire to help people heal and to empower people in their healing journey, especially around their health, their physical health, I started 2 completely new businesses in the meantime, while I wasn't keeping Megan Edge Healing going at that time, which is my company where I do all this healing work for people and helping with trauma and grief and loss and empowerment and all of those wonderful things. I started a company called Beyond the Garden Gate Botanicals. And Beyond the Garden Gate Botanicals is where I educate people about nature as medicine food as medicine, aromatherapy as medicine.
Wow.
I have a whole healing line of products that I now offer through my Etsy store and in person, which are salves and serums and tinctures and balms to help support our physical being as we go through these emotional and what spiritual crises. We need to recognize the holisticness of ourselves. And anytime there's a journey, a healing journey, that journey has to happen at the physical, the spiritual, the emotional, the intellectual, and the physical levels. And I want to be able to have things that people can hold on to that help them acknowledge that importance of that connection. And so I continue to create these healing products from the materials that I harvest and forage for in the wild or in my back garden, in my herb garden, for example, and find ways to make these accessible to people. But not only that, but to teach people how they can do it for themselves if they wish to, so that they have that understanding of that empowerment, that nature is here to help us. And it helped me being able to be in nature. And even if it wasn't my beach and my forest as I knew it on that property, there are so many other places that I was able to take myself and to let myself be in that stillness of that forest or that beach and receive the healing that is there. And you don't have to live near a beach or a forest. You could have a park. It could be your backyard. But it's about getting your feet on the ground and feeling, the earth beneath your feet. That's a huge piece of this healing journey. And I really felt strongly that I wanted to have a way to bring what I grew up with and what I knew to be so powerful and potent in terms of the healing journey to people, to make it accessible to them.
Yeah.
So that became Beyond the Garden Gate Botanicals. And I've written books around Beyond the Garden Gate Botanicals, and I've got all kinds of resources that I now share with people. And then on a completely different side, because I can't just do one thing at a time, I realized a dream. And that dream was to be able to do editing and proofreading, which might sound completely counterintuitive to everything else that I do, except that my whole life, whenever I've read books, I will find that one missing comma, that one missing period, that little spelling mistake in the entire book. I've always done that. I've always seen that. And I've had this little voice in the back of my head saying, you'd be a pretty good editor. You actually would be a really good editor. And I've helped a lot of people, a lot of students especially, craft their words around their business and how they're going to market it. I've helped people write books. And I thought, okay, in this space that I've created, I'm going to get certified as an editor. And so I went online, I found a really great program. I did the whole program, passed with flying colors, put out my shingle, which is the last line proofreading and editing services. And I do that also. And I do that for people who are writing books about empowerment, people who are writing their personal story and their journey. I do the work for the people who are talking the language that I know because it's my language, which is of healing and empowerment.
Yeah. And it's so funny you're talking about that because, now with my trademark battle won, let's say it's 90%, I can write my book Unstuckable, right?
Yeah.
Without somebody, right? But editing is not my strength. Talking into a microphone, that is my strength. But you see, what you've discovered is it's not even rebirth or reinvention. What I hear you talk, it's you tapped in creatively and intuitively to a talent, and then you had the faith to move forward and take action. You see, I wasn't kidding. I grew up with this interesting spiritual family, right? Mama Doris was the Joel Osteen of women back in the day. She was positive Baptist woman. You just had to hear her. She had her own version of life in the Bible. You think when she talked about the Bible, you think she is not talking about the Bible. But one of the things she used to say to us girls is faith without works is dead.
Mm-hmm.
And we never understood it until I saw it in the Walking Dead TV series. Did I understand what that meant?
Interesting.
what we're talking about is faith by itself is wonderful to hold. But even the Dalai Lama gets off the mountain and comes down and earns money for his cause.
Yes.
That's the part that we should talk about. What does it take to put, now that you've described intuition, you've described creativity, now we have to talk about faith.
Yeah.
Because without that, the other two, I'm not sure what we're talking about.
And you know what? Faith is really the mindset. That's what I was talking about at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, it's the belief that no matter what is happening, no matter how awful it feels, it will pass. And you can be an active participant in that passing of the experience that you're having. And part of that participation is what we just talked about, is letting yourself be in it, giving yourself permission to feel it. If you need to have a pity party, have a pity party. Stay in bed with the covers over your head all day, but only for one day. Because then you have to get up and you have to move forward. And the faith piece is, I know this will get better. I know something else will show up. I know that. I don't have to know what it is. I don't have to know what it's going to look like or when it's going to happen. But what has helped me move through not only the last 3 years since that whole upheaval, but the last 5, 6, 7 years, 8 years. You know, we went through a renoviction, is what we call it here in BC in Canada, where the house that we thought we were going to be in for until the kids were teenagers and moving out, the person who owned the house sold it and we're renovating it. And so as tenants, we got renovicted. We were given 3 months and we had to find someplace else. That's the second loss of a house for me. The first one was when I left the family house, the marriage house rather. And as we were going through that process, I just remember saying, I don't know how and I don't know yet when or where, but I know we will find something better. Something better than this. And it's a way of saying to the universe, and this is the faith piece, it's this or something better, right? Or even to put a challenge to the universe and say, it can't get any better than this. Like, what if you're in the depth of a crisis, all you're saying is that it can't get any worse than this, and then it gets worse. What if you flipped that around? And even though it seems like it's the worst thing ever, you say, it can't get any better than this. The challenge you put to yourself and your mind and the universe is, oh yeah, let me show you how it can get better than this. And the thing about it is, it does. It does. Part of the faith piece is in allowing yourself to see, just like your counselor, your therapist said to you, you know, when have you never come back from something? And you're like, wow, actually, I have not never come back from something.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I've always come back for something. Faith is a perspective, I believe. When we have faith, it gives us a perspective that might be different than the one that we've fallen into and let ourselves fallen into. So the next time you hear yourself saying it can't get any worse than this, I invite you to say, it can't get any better than this.
Yeah, that's right.
And just see what happens. And here's the other part of it too with the faith piece, Pat. I know, and I could see, even as everything was unraveling, that so many amazing, beautiful people, so many angels in my life, in our lives, showed up and said, how can I help you? What can I do? I'm so sorry this is happening, but what can I do to help you? And I had, and still to this day, have such deep gratitude for the years that we did have that property, the amazing memories of all the times we had community up there. We did Canada Day long weekends, 40 people with their kids and dogs and tents in the backyard, and all the memories and all the healing I did there and everything about it. I have such deep gratitude for. Not once have I ever felt that I was owed anything. I just thought it was going to be different than the way it turned out. But the love that I have for the people who showed up for me and the strangers who drove by. We had the front lawn, which is covered in all the things that we only had a month to unpack 75 years worth of history of this.
Wow. I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah. And so we had this free garage sale. We just constantly had stuff on the front lawn, and the front lawn of the house was right along a main road on this island.
Hmm.
And we had all these strangers coming up and saying, "Wow, this is amazing. What are you doing?" And then I would just briefly say, "Well, we're having to leave." Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. The stories that we shared on that front
Mhm.
lawn of people telling me what their experience was like of something like this, that they understood the depth of what we were losing,
Yeah.
those connections. And this is why I say that it's important to understand that upheaval can be an invitation. And instead of rushing forward and pushing against something, if you allow yourself to become curious about what is happening and why, and give yourself those moments of stillness and feel into that quiet,
Yeah.
there's a whole wealth of support and information and intuition and faith and creativity in that stillness from that invitation.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought this up because um, I'm getting ready to take a trip back to New Jersey, and the chaos of driving and of flying, and oh my God, all that. And Linda just looked at me and said, "Why don't we just drive? Why don't we just take your car, and it'll allow us a couple of days to just lean in,
Hmm.
right?" I forget her words exactly, but they were like your words.
Hmm.
A minute to catch our breath,
Yeah.
to just relax. Now, people say drive in 4 days. You think, yeah, well, kind of, if you've gone through what Megan's gone through, right? It's a moment. But I want to thank you for sharing this today because more people than not have been living in the silence of things like that all year long,
Hmm.
afraid to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, we're taught, I believe, in our culture to, stiff upper lip it. Um, just keep going, just get along with it. And because we're not in a culture that acknowledges grief in any significant way, we don't want to see it. We don't want to see other people's grief because we're uncomfortable with it, especially if we haven't done our own grief work. We don't know how to hold space for somebody else's grief necessarily, and so we give platitudes from our heart. We're wanting to help, perhaps, but when I saw something really interesting, and I know you and I talked about this when we did our show on death and dying after my father passed away. My stepfamily is Jewish, and in the Jewish tradition, grief is acknowledged, and the person or people who are grieving are held by the community for an entire year. There's none of this, you've got 2 days and then get back to work. I mean, if you have a job outside of the community, yes, probably, but the community holds that space for you where it's okay for you to put your blinds down and just be really sad about what you've lost. And the community respects that.
Yeah.
At the end of that year, there is another ritual and almost a celebration of that year. And at that point, you are now expected to return to the community as a solid member. And it's not that you can't still have your sadness, of course, but now you're expected to be there for someone else, right? I love that. I love that tradition. And I feel that that's something that I embraced with that loss. And then the compounding of all the other losses that I hadn't really grieved yet was to give myself that year. It was about 18 months, but I gave myself that time to cocoon and allow myself and my family to have our grief.
Yeah.
And I knew that at a certain point, I was going to get the nudge that now's the time. And there were a few times when I pushed back. There were a few times where I thought, right, I'm good. I can do this. And I tried to reopen my business. And you know what? Somebody else would die. I had that happen 3 times. And I
Oh my
thought,
gosh.
okay, I don't think now is the time. And then one day, like I trusted, that's the faith piece. I knew one day I was going to wake up and something would have shifted and the energy would start to come back and I would want to re-engage. And I felt that energy. I had that day. I woke up and it was crystal clear. And I sat down in front of my computer and I thought, okay, time to redo the website, time to get going. I could feel that energy. And I've been on that energy wave for the last 2.5 years, finding those new places to put my feet,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And when it
Yeah.
came to TTR, to you and to Linda and to Jessica and to the whole family, I missed you so much over those
Mm.
last 3 years. And yet I also, every time I would tune in the intuition part and go, now? You're like, no, I sent some emails, they never got there. I went, okay, okay. I am allowing myself to wait, knowing and trusting that that moment will come where everything aligns, right?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Exactly, though. But you know what's perfect about it is the time frame you talked about. We weren't in the place we are today. So at a
Mhm,
lot of levels, that didn't make sense in the universal laws, right? For
mhm.
things, it was a not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Linda and I were talking about this thing, this move we're doing, and we've tried it two other times, emotionally and mentally, and it was like, what? That was the boat in the water trying to
Mm.
go upstream
Upstream. Yeah.
without a paddle.
That's the other part of the analogy, isn't it? Trying to
It
row
is. But what you described is not just deep in nature. And I want to thank you for sharing this. Megan, thank you so much for today. You and I have much more to talk about, but this is the kind of conversation that the world really needs now.
Yeah.
Of course, they need to know how we get out of it, how we do it. They also want to hear they're not alone.
Yeah.
So, closing message, tell us what you want to leave us with, but also give us your website again.
Okay, the website is meganedge.ca.
It's easy.
Just had it redone a year and a half ago. It's fabulous. It's from the ground up, brand new website. What do I want to leave you with? I want to leave you with the knowledge, the knowing that no matter what you're going through right now, there is that proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. And you're not alone, and you don't have to do it alone.
Mm,
The number of people who shared their stories with me as we were going through that loss, I felt so supported by their knowing of what it was, what it felt like, of what it was feeling like to go through that. And so the more that you share your story, not in a woe is me way, but in a this is what's happening to me way, you know, that the power of that story is what creates the connection. I mean, that's what the heart's journey is all about. And just to bring it full circle, the very first episode of Playing on the Edge Radio, Radical Change with Ease, that you and I did
yeah,
was about rewriting your story.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I went back to that today and thought, well, this is just perfect.
it is.
Here's another rewrite without um, what's the word I'm looking for? Without making the story less meaningful.
That's right.
It's about connecting to the meaning of the story and then the ways in which those stories can connect us to one another so we
Yeah,
have that community.
yeah. That's when we breathe life into a story that creates a legacy all by itself.
Yeah.
Thank you, Megan, for everything. I want to thank you all. Please, if you've missed any part of this, go back because there's so much in here. And by the way, so much more to come from my friend and colleague, Megan Edge. We'll see you next time.